This is Fred Beck from Fred Talks Fighting. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by, once again, Guy Sports commentator Andy Clarke. So thank you very much for coming on, Andy.
No problem.
So how are you, Andy? Did you have a good Christmas?
Quiet like everybody, and that was what we expected. So no big deal. Just me and my wife, and yeah, it was fine. It was fine. I thought Christmas TV was a bit of a letdown. I don't know whether they kind of given up on it a bit because of all the other options there are out there now, or whether they just couldn't really make that much new stuff during the course of the year. But yeah, as I said, that there are so many things at your fingertips now. You can always find something.
I think quiet is the answer everyone really has. Yeah, last Christmas we watched Gavin and Stacey. I thought that was really good. This year, fortunately, they didn't do another one. So anymore, let's get into the fights which happened last night. What I really like actually is the fact that in the UK, normally for fights you have to wake up 4 a.m., 5 a.m. This time I only started at 11, which is really nice.
That was good. That was good. Dazn did well with that. That was a clever bit of thinking on their part, because now that they've gone global with their global launch, these are the kinds of things they need to think about, because generally those fights at that time of night are not ideal because they're really early rather than being really late. So staying up for them is I mean, you could do it. I mean, you could do it, but I'm a lot older than you, and I don't really fancy staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning anymore. So I'd have to set an alarm and get up. And generally, I think fight fans in the UK would have had the feeling down the years that, understandably, the US market is a US market, and they're never going to do anything to do the UK any favours, even though big fights in this country sometimes have been at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to cater for North American TV. So it's good to see it kind of happening the other way around, because 6 p.m. in the evening there, Eastern time, I think it was for US viewers, I don't see that being a big problem. It's still the evening, and but it makes a massive difference for us. So yeah, I thought that was clever by Dazn. They did well with that, and it was a good fight. It was always going to be really interesting because there were lots of unknowns with Garcia, but you know, he talks the talk, but he stepped up.
He certainly did. Luke Campbell had a lot better resume than Ryan Garcia. Luke Campbell's been in there with Jorge Linares, Lomachenko, gone the distance with both. So I think it was a very big statement, Ryan stopping him. But what was your reaction when Luke dropped him in the second round?
He's such an interesting fighter, Garcia. He does still do quite a lot wrong. There are quite a lot of technical flaws there. He stands quite tall. He comes in with his chin quite high. When he lets his hands go, he doesn't pay any attention to any kind of defense. The gloves never come back anywhere near where they're really supposed to be. He just commits completely to his attacks. So he is open to getting caught, and that's what happened. And when it happens to someone, it's so interesting to see how they'll react, because he went down heavy. Like, that was a proper knockdown. His eyes were clear, and he didn't look off balance when he got back up. It was never close to him not beating the count or the referee waving it off. But you look at the way he went down, you can tell by the way a fighter goes down as to how hard they've been hit. Because if they manage to put out a glove or turn their hip or do something to break their fall, then you can tell that it's maybe not that solid. But if they just clatter straight down like they stepped off the edge of a building, then you know that they've really been caught clean. And that was what happened. But he recovered from it well, and he showed that he's got balls. He comes to fight. He's always going to be in interesting fights, but he will always be in danger of getting caught. But to catch him and do some damage, you're going to need to be a technically sound fighter like Campbell and a solid puncher. There aren't that many of them around. You know, what I've just done there is describe a really, really good fighter. And Campbell is a really good fighter. But I do wonder whether maybe when he watches it back, Luke, he'll wonder whether he should have jumped on Garcia a bit more after that knockdown. I think that'll probably be the only thing he might look at and just think, yeah, maybe I should have gone for it more. But he's right up close and he can see him. He can look in his eyes. And I think he probably got the impression that he wasn't badly hurt. and to empty the tank at that early stage of the fight would have been a mistake.
And after that, a few rounds later in the 5th round, Ron nearly knocked Luke out. Luke turned his back, but then he was saved by the bell. What did you make of that? Did you think that maybe the ref should have given a standing count since the ropes kind of held him up?
No, I thought the ref got that right, because it was right at the end of the round, and he was looking for the bell there, Luke Campbell. He knew it was coming. I don't think you could say that the ropes kept him up there. He was kind of getting on his bike to get away from the situation, but I think the referee got that one right. It was at that stage of the fight really where I thought that things had started to turn, and it wasn't looking very good for Campbell, because I scored it last night, so I had no Twitter, I didn't listen to any of the commentary or anything like that. I did my kind of scoring conditions, and after 6 rounds, I had Garcia 4 rounds to 2 up, so 1 point up with a knockdown. But at that stage, it didn't look good for Campbell to me at that stage, and that the end of that 5th round kind of showed that, because he's got really quick hands, Garcia, and he's got heavy hands too. And you could say that there was evidence of that from previous performances, but given the caliber of opponent, you could say with any great certainty. But we could see last night that he's got heavy hands, and the speed of them is going to mean that he will get away with making some mistakes. But when he hit, I mean, the way he finished the fight, what I like about him is that there's nothing. He's quite basic actually as a fighter. He's quite basic. He doesn't really. He saw the gap for that left hand, and Campbell, he had his gloves high and he left himself open, and he just absolutely smashed him. And when you see the replay of that body shot, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And everybody likes to talk a lot now about there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and people like to talk in riddles quite a lot in boxing, and talk about and overcomplicate things, and talk about how he feinted this, sold that, did this, did that. There was none of that. He just saw, you've got your gloves too high, there's your body, boom, and it was over. And you can't really pick too many holes in what Garcia did last night. People do, and they have, and they talked about, he got knocked down, blah blah. But that was a big tick in the margin as far as I was concerned. The way he responded to it, and he's going to be great to watch. He's going to be really, really good to watch.
So now, where do you think, was last 4 losses now for Luke Campbell? Where do you think he goes from here?
It's difficult for him now, because that lightweight division is just so competitive. You would obviously put Garcia ahead of him now, of course. I would say that Haney is ahead of him. I think Haney would probably beat him. I said that and thought that before last night. And you'd put Davis in that same bracket, and Lomachenko, of course, has beaten him, and then you've got Lopez. So it's hard for him. I mean, what could happen is if Lopez decides that he's going to move up and vacates all of those belts at some stage, I don't think he'll do it straight away. I think he'll have one more at lightweight, maybe a couple more at lightweight, but that could happen relatively soon, in which case it'd be a free-for-all. They'd all become vacant, and he might be able to get a fight for a vacant belt, and that could work. That could work for him. But in that division, and I don't see him stepping up to super lightweight, because I just don't think he's big enough. He's just a dive in the wall lightweight, and he's just a bit unlucky, I guess, that his time has coincided with Linares, Lomachenko, now Lopez, Gervonta Davis. Not all opportunities are equal in boxing, are they? Some people get world title opportunities, which it's never easy, but which are considerably easier than other people's. And his timing has been unfortunate.
I think Lopez will have 2 more fights until he moves up to 140 at super lightweight. I mean, he's got the IBF belt, and for the IBF belt, there's a rehydration clause, and Lopez does find that weight cut hard. So now, after the fight, in the post-fight interviews, Ryan Garcia called out Tank Davis. Well, Tank's 5'5" and Ryan's 5'10". If he knocked Ryan Garcia down, he wouldn't let him off the hook like Luke Campbell did. But how do you think that Tank matches up against Ryan Garcia?
I think at the minute I would put him ahead of Garcia. I think after last night, I think it's a really good fight between him and Haney. I would maybe slightly shade Haney just because technically he is the more sound fighter of the two, but then can he take Garcia's power and relentless kind of approach? Maybe he can, maybe we can't, maybe he can't. We don't know. That's going to be a serious test for anybody. But I would put Gervonta Davis ahead of him, and of course Lomachenko and Lopez ahead of him. It was strange to hear him say that because he now is mandatory for Devin Haney, and they're both with the same broadcaster. So that's the fight that's going to happen next. So I don't know why he was talking about Gervonta Davis, because that's a much more difficult fight to make. He's going to have to fight Devin Haney, and that's a great fight. I'm very keen on that. It'll be a really good build up and a really good watch. Two very young, very good fighters. So I'd just be concentrating on that if I were him. And it's a world title shot too. I mean, this WBC situation with the franchise championship is completely unnecessary. But the fact is that Devin Haney is WBC champion. So Garcia's got the opportunity now. So he just needs to be thinking about that. You know, he doesn't need to be thinking about Gervonta Davis.
And you're a Sky commentator, and there's a lot of criticism for the DAZN commentators, Chris Mannix, and the other commentators. I mean, people are tweeting about it on Twitter. Dave Codwell had something to say about it. What do you make of the DAZN commentary?
Well, this is going to sound like a horrific cop-out, but I genuinely didn't listen to it because I decided to score the fight, and I just tuned in for the main event because I had other things to do last night. If I'm going to score it, then what that means for me is no interaction with anyone. So I watch it by myself. My wife didn't want to watch it anyway, so that was fine. I watch it by myself, no social media, no commentary. I did see the comments, and it's something that we get leveled at us at Sky fairly regularly. So it's, you know, I would never be one to jump on the back of fellow practitioners, but it is something that viewers talk about often, and it is something that all of us as broadcasters have got to pay real attention to and try and make sure that you don't do it. I don't know whether they did or they didn't last night because I didn't hear it, but it's something that I know that I personally, that is the uppermost thing in my mind at all times, is that you have to be fair, and getting yourself in a position to be fair when the bell goes. It takes quite a lot. I mean, it sounds very, very simple because, well, you should just call it fairly. I mean, how hard can that be? But if you have to make sure basically that you know as much about each of the two fighters. You can't know vastly more about one than about the other, because if you do, then you'll end up talking more about that fighter most likely. If you know more about one than the other, and then that's the one that starts well, then you can get on that train sometimes, and it might be a bit difficult to get off. So there's quite a lot that goes into it, but you know, I think it's probably fair to say that US commentators in general and US commentary style, not everyone, but they do like big, bold statements. That seems to be the preferred kind of method over there. And I think that's always been true. Like, not necessarily of everybody, but across other sports too. They like big, bold statements. And I think for that reason, and they like a number of voices too. And I think for that reason, sometimes you can get people competing with each other on the same commentary team for airtime and for who can make the biggest and boldest statement. I don't know what they said last night. I genuinely don't, but that, I think that does happen, because we tried the 3-man commentary team at Sky for a while, and it's difficult because if you're doing what I'm doing, if you're doing the blow by blow, as they would describe it in America, you do need the other two people to show some discipline and let you do it. Because if they don't, then it just becomes a free-for-all. And I personally am not a big fan of the three voices, or even more than that. Sometimes you've got like people all over the place chipping in. It can work if people understand what their role is and have got the kind of experience and discipline to stick to it. But you know, commentary is something that people comment on a lot, and that's never going to That's never going to change. But it doesn't bother me. Everybody's more than entitled to their opinion, and they can say whatever they like about it. It is definitely one of those jobs, commentary, where everybody seems to think that they could do it better than you. But that's just the nature of doing something that's kind of in the public domain, and you can't let that upset you. I mean, it's I do see people kind of biting in reaction to criticism sometimes, and I don't really understand why they do it, because there's not really a lot to be gained from it. I mean, Dazn may be looking to bring a kind of a different sound, a different style, a different vibe to it. I generally think that you don't really need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to covering sport. There is always going to be big currency and people who know what they're talking about. That is that is the most important thing. If your coverage is going to have credibility, you've got to have people who know what they're talking about. I've met the Dazn guys a few times, and they seem to me like they know what they're talking about. So, but I'll be watching more of it in future, because there'll be more. There's some good fights coming up. There's some good ones coming up at the end of January. There's Kovalev against Melakuziev, Estrada, Chocolatito's not that far behind it. Stuff like that. So, yeah. So I'll have more of an informed opinion on it soon enough. But like I say, if it did so happen that it wasn't really for me, then I'd just turn the sound off. I watched the fight with the sound off last night so I could score it. It didn't bother me.
Didn't bother you at all. That's why, if you don't like the commentary, turn the sound off. That's Andy Clarke's message. So, Andy, thank you very much for the interview. I really appreciate it. I know you're a very busy man. You have a podcast with Matthew Macklin, and where can people find that?
So you can find that anywhere, really. It's called Macklin's Take. So yeah, me and Matt, and we're on a break at the minute, but we'll be back towards the end of January. Probably the next one will drop on January the 19th. And yeah, it was good fun that last year, actually, because that was something that gave us a bit of routine, a bit of normality throughout the year. Discovering Zoom was interesting because it meant that we could kind of cast the net a bit wider. But yeah, we'll be back in the new year. It was a busy year with that, and we might look to it. We'll see what happens with other stuff, but we might look to expand that a little bit this year. We've been doing it for a while now. Macklin's Take, you can get it on any major platform.
All right, so thank you very much for your time, Andy.
All right, cheers.